when you were born, the life expectancy of a black man in the United States was like
44.
44. Oh, God. Is it true that Kobe took tap dancing to work on his basketball footwork?
He had a person come in and teach him piano lessons.
I know you read multiple books at once, why do you do that?
Tell him about the dream. So now Martin Luther King ad-libs that into the speech.
Wow, that's heavy, man. It's a little emotional. When you were born, the life expectancy of a black man in the United States was like
44.
44. Oh God, I was even generous with 48. Wow. So I'm 45. I don't feel that old. So that's a pretty dire prognosis.
In its historic context, to be a black man and still alive in 1937 the average age was 44. Here we are today, and the average age, life expectancy for a black male is 77. And so that historic context helps us understand how difficult the journey was going to be along the way.
Geez, that's really. Actually, now I'm curious what the life expectancy was for a white male born in 1937.
87. I've already beat the odds already.
Yeah, you are doing quite well. And your dad passed away when you were 9.
And my mother had a nervous breakdown when I was 12, and she had to be hospitalized. My mom started doing weird things. One day she comes home from work and she's preparing dinner and she's in the kitchen. I walk in the kitchen and she has in those days we had these food stamps and rations for food because
it was a war.
She had this big sack of flour and she's pouring it in the sink and running water over it. And I said, "Mom, what are you doing?" And she just mumbled something, and then she started doing strange things, so subsequently, my grandmother took her to the hospital for a checkup. The hospital still exists in Washington, D.C., St. Elizabeth. At that time, they called it an insane asylum.
Oh, wow.
And so they took my mom. They felt that she needed to be hospitalized. And so from that point going forward, my grandma basically raised me. I can distinctly remember the first time my grandma took me to the hospital to see my mom. She had been in there for a while, and we go to see my mom, and she's in a waiting room. She's in a patient's hospital gown, and she's sitting there in the chair when we walk in, and she doesn't even look up at us. My mom says she's sitting there with her fingers going around like this, and so my grandma. She started talking to her. Vivian, George, and I came to see you play, and my grandma basically carried on the conversation because my mom never looked at us. She just sat there, and then instinctively my grandmother knew when it was time to leave. So we gave her a kiss and a hug, and we left, and we were walking to the bus stop, and I started crying. And my grandma said, "What's wrong with you, boy?" I said, "I'm never coming to see my mom again like that. I can't bear to see her like that." I said, "I'm never coming again." And my grandma slapped me upside the head and said, "Boy, don't you ever say that. That's your mother. No matter what happens, she's always going to be your mother. She's always going to love you, and you love her. And don't you ever say that because she's having problems that you're never going to come see her again." And that became an emotional issue. And so for the rest of my life, my mom was hospitalized. And so now who's going to raise George?
Right, you're kind of an orphan almost
right.
at this point.
And my grandma, at that point forward, she really raised me.
Yeah, wow. By the way, the shoes that you're wearing, what are those?
I don't even know the name of them.
It says APL, but I don't know.
APL.
I don't know anything
about it. It's a new brand that just came out. It's been out about a couple of years. And all my Nike people are going to be bad.
I was going to say, are those Nike? Because they don't look like Nike.
They're real wide and comfortable.
Gotcha.
And Phil Knight knows who loves them, but
I was going to say,
at
you
the
better hope
same
he's not
time,
watching this.
I gotta, especially at this age, I've got to make sure I got nice, comfortable shoes to take care of my feet.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, because I looked up Phil Knight before this, and he's the same age as you, I think.
No, he's a little younger.
A little younger. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's 82.
Oh, it says 87 on the internet.
Did it?
Well, that doesn't mean the internet's right.
Yeah, I didn't realize that we were. I thought I was 2 years older than him.
Huh. Well, we'll have to double check that.
But we're two old dudes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I just thought, if he's watching this, he's going to be upset that
I
you're not
talked
wearing
to
the
him
Nike.
the other day. He called me the other day about the book.
Oh, good. I figured he would pick one of those up. All right. So at this point, effectively, you're an orphan. Your grandmother starts raising you. Who become the biggest influences in your life? Because it sounds like it's kind of academics and the nuns and the women at the school.
So at that point, my grandma's working 3 jobs a day, and then coming home trying to fix dinner, take care of us. And she worked for this rich white family in Georgetown. And one day she was talking to the daughter, and she was telling them about the plight of George and how it's working on her and how difficult it's been for her to try to raise me. And so the daughter, Margaret, said to her, she said, well, maybe I can help out. She says, I can get George in through Catholic Charities at a private boys' school in Pennsylvania for young men who are from broken families and an orphan. And I can get the Catholic Charities to sponsor them. Sure. And so now off I go to St. Michael's boarding school, and it's up in the northeast part of Pennsylvania. Probably the biggest city near it would be Scranton. And so from that point forward, I was one of 108 students. The school was on a farming property, and so he had to do chores. I did everything from milk cows to bale hay.
What? That's a far cry from where you grew up.
And you would get a chore a week. So one week they'd say, George, you're on the chapel cleaning crew. So that meant each day I'd have to show up at the chapel with some of the other guys who dust the pews or scrub the floors and all those things like that. And so, and then during the day, we went to class, and the school basically had about 20 nuns who did the administrative part, and then they had one priest who basically was the supervisor of the school.
This sounds kind of like, was it one of those where if you're bad, they make you put your hand out and they hit you with a ruler? It sounds like one of those schools.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't that strict.
Okay.
Thank God. But there were high expectations of you to be a contributor. All of us were. At that time, we didn't realize it, but we were investing in our own futures. Sure. And learning to deal with life from different perspectives. It reminds me of a story one time when I was sitting in the kitchen watching my grandma cook, and she's making this big bowl of stew in that. And whenever she would cook or bake, she'd tell me, come in the kitchen and watch it. And so sometimes I'd get impatient, so one time when she was cooking, I said, "Dear, why do you make me come in the kitchen all the time and watch you make food?" And she said, "Yeah." She says, "George, let me ask you a question. What are you going to do if no woman wants you? What if no woman wants you? You're going to have to wash your own clothes. You're going to have to cook for yourself. You're going to do all these." She says, "I'm just trying to prepare you in case no woman wants you. And now you're going to have to take care of yourself."
That's very sweet. What happens when you die old and alone? That's a mean thing to say. Gosh, jeez. But it seems like your life could have easily gone the other way. I mean, if you didn't get into this boarding school, what were you going to be surrounded by? Trouble, urban environment, parents around?
God only knows what. I'm not even sure what the alternatives were. it would have been a totally different life because I'd had to spend most of the days by myself or go to school and walk back.
Were schools segregated back then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that would have been,
Absolutely. And at that time in Washington, D.C., the population of blacks was 73% of the population of the city were blacks, and that's how they came up with the nickname Chocolate City.
I did not know that. Wow, that's super racist by today's standards. Holy smokes!
And in those days, the black neighborhood was so dense that you could easily go weeks would never see another white person.
Really? Yeah. Wow.
In a black neighborhood, there were three movie theaters: the Dunbar, the Republic, and the Howard Theater. And the Howard Theater had live stage performances also. And all the banks that were black, the businesses were primarily black, and I lived on the second floor over a grocery store, and there were 3 apartments on that second floor, and they're all one room apartments, and and there was 1 bathroom for all 3 apartments.
Wow.
So we all had to learn to work out a system for utilizing the bathroom, and it was, if you walked out the front door and across the street and up the hill, about 5 blocks we were from Howard University's campus. So it was, and I grew up in a very black society. And what was interesting, all along the journey, race wasn't wasn't as volatile an issue as it is today. And from the time I was at St. Mike's until I got to Villanova, I never heard the N word.
Wow. Well, I get Wow.
My introduction to race and society started when I enrolled at Villanova.
Let's talk about that, because it was pretty interesting. Well, actually, let me back up a slight bit. It's funny because you mentioned early on several people believed in you. Apparently your grandma didn't. she thought you were going to end up alone. But your friend who kept you from getting cut from the basketball team, there was one of the nuns who unlocked the gym so you could shoot baskets, and I guess she just sat there while you did that. I mean,
Sister Lord, she saw something in me that I never had seen. She would always give me these pep talks about doing my schoolwork, getting it in on time. And she would go to some of the other nuns that taught me in class and ask them how I was doing, and so forth. And then she would get we had one coach, Gene Villella. He played for the Redskins in his day. He coached all the sports: basketball, football, boxing, all that. So she would go, Sister Lord would go to Jean and get the key to the gym, and she would take me over to the gym and have me shoot, and she'd just sit there in a folding chair watching me shoot. And at that time, I was starting to love the game more and more, and I was starting to get better at the game. And so now we get to my senior year, and all of a sudden, because I didn't start playing basketball until I was in 9th grade.
That's pretty late,
so
right?
now time I get to my senior year, my game has really grown. And in my senior year, I scored 51 in a game and 50 in another game. And I was like the second leading scorer in the country. And so now things start to change. The word's getting around about George. And so we played this team, St. Rose of Carbondale, on the road. And we go up and we beat them, and I had 39 points in the game. And so after the game, as I come out of the locker room, and I look up, there's this white gentleman standing there, tall gentleman, and he's looking at me, and I look at him. And when I grew up as a youngster, you were taught children should be seen and not heard. Mm-hmm. So And so I just looked at him momentarily, and I didn't know what to say. And he said, he handed me a business card. He said, "My name's Jack Ramsey. I'm the head basketball coach at St. Joe's, and we've been watching you play, and we're going to offer you a scholarship, and we'll continue to follow you. And when the season's over, we're going to offer you a scholarship." So that takes place. I get on the bus. And my high school coach says, "Who's that man you were talking to?" And I showed him the card. Mm-hmm. And he said, "What did he say to you?" And I said, he's going to offer me a scholarship. And he said, and I could tell my coach was really shocked. He said, "He's going to offer you a scholarship?" I said, "Yes, sir." And then I said, "Coach, what's a scholarship?"
Yeah.
I had no idea what a scholarship was. And then subsequently, I got an offer from Michigan State and one from Gettysburg and a couple schools. But at the end of the day, there was no question I was going to end up going to a Catholic school. The nuns would have never let me go to any place like else. And so I get this offer from Villanova. I go down for the visit. My coach and I, we go down. We stay for 3 days. The coach is taking us around campus. The second day, he said, "Hey, you have to take the entrance exam while you're here."
What does that mean?
And so I took the entrance exam. And the next day, when we came to meet with the coach said, he says, "Hey, who did the teaching when you were up at St. Mike's?" And I said, "Nuns." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, your score's really high." And then it made me realize that the nuns had prepared me for for this moment.
So it seems like these little bits of kindness that you got, well, not even little bits, large amounts of kindness that you got from people really helped you along the way. And it seems like maybe that's informed who you are now, because you're known for being kind, being giving, supporting people. That's your whole life has been that way. And it's maybe because you received a seriously life-changing amount of that when you were young.
There was a special ending to part of the scholarship
thing. Go for it.
So I tell my grandma that I thought she'd be as excited as I was.
Sure.
She was. I called and I said, "Dear, guess what?" She said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to get a scholarship to Villanova." And she said, "A scholarship? What's a scholarship?" And so I said, "Well, I go to school and I play basketball and go to class and they'll pay for it." And now dead silence is on the phone. I said, Dear, are you there?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Why are you so quiet?" She says, "Oh, I'm so disappointed in myself." And I said, "About what?" She said, "I thought I raised you better than that." She says, "And white man or white people going to give you no scholarship to get an education. And if you play basketball, they outlawed us from the schools. At the time we weren't allowed to be taught to read or write, and all the things that they've done to take education away from us. And now you're telling me that you can go to this school and play basketball, and they're going to educate you. They've been trying to keep us uneducated for life." And so she based it on her life.
Her life experience. Yeah, that's sad.
Experiences in that. And so she just, I could never get it. I called a couple of my cousins and that and said, "Hey, try to help her understand." But she never came to grips with that. So when the 4 years are up and it's graduation time, the first person I sent an invitation to was my grandma.
Did she finally believe you when you're holding your degree in your hand?
Yeah. But it was so funny that she could not. She thought this whole thing was a scam.
It's a trick. Yeah. Oh man, that's sad, because her life experience was telling her this is impossible.
She might have been the best teacher and mentor I ever had, because those conversations in the kitchen and that were always going to come away with a couple of golden nuggets. One time we're in there and I'm sitting with her and she says, "George, did I ever tell you that during the days of slavery, the plantation owners used to hide their money in a book and put it up on the bookshelf because they didn't have a sophisticated bank system then. And I said, dear, why would they put the money in the book and put them up on the shelves? And she said, because they knew that the slaves would never take the books off the shelf because they couldn't read. And the more I contemplated on it, I said, I'm never going to let that happen to me. If a person can control your mind, then they can control your body. And so I am never going to allow myself to be in a position where they're going to take away my ability to think and to learn how to think differently about it.
Wow, that's heavy, man. It's a little emotional here, because the way she thought about the idea that, like, look, everything that comes from white people is a trick. No one's ever gonna help you get ahead. It almost it's you can kind of get a picture of like what her life was like. You're on your own. No one's gonna help you. It's a sad way to think about things, but she wasn't wrong.
No, and she was. I had in those days. I never heard the word mentor or that. But basically. Sure. She would always drop a few nuggets on me during the time when she was cooking, and then that was, as I looked at it later in life, I said, I was going to an advanced class in how to live a better life from this woman who never got past sixth grade.
Yeah, it's really amazing, honestly. Okay, so you played for Villanova. Were you? It says you were. I get my notes say that you were the second black player on the team ever. Is that correct?
Yeah. When I got there, there was a young man who had just finished playing named Kenny Harrison. He played for Archbishop Malloy in New York, and he was, at that time, freshmen were ineligible, so I didn't get to play with him. But what happened my freshman year, he ended up being my roommate. We lived in this little, in one of the halls there on campus called Austin Hall. And so that in itself was a blessing, because here I am, this person, he's been there on the campus. He's from New York. He's so much more socially sophisticated than I was. And I would hear stories, or he would tell me different things, or, hey, if we go to this function right here, make sure you got this. And also another element of discipline was at Villanova at that time, you had to wear a coat and tie to every function. The classroom, meals.
In class?
Yeah, you had to wear a coat and tie to class, to mass, to meals, and they wouldn't let you in. If you showed up and didn't have it in, they wouldn't let you in the classroom. So
okay. Now people show up looking.
So now we get this fashion statement. So a lot of the guys didn't like the ties, and so they would get a clip-on bow tie, and so everybody had a clip-on bow tie. So when you're in go in the classroom, you just clip it on. As soon as you come out, you take it, throw it in your body and in your pocket. And that. But
rebels with their clip-on bow ties.
Yeah, but you could not be in class. And the other thing about you're only allowed one cut or one miss. We call it one cut. You could only miss class once. And if you missed it anymore, the highest grade you could get was a C, no matter if you did A work or not.
This doesn't count if you're sick. This is just like you didn't show up because you didn't feel like it.
Well, no, if you were sick, that's something, and you can prove it. But so they had mandatory class attendance.
Wow. That is
so
a
you can
far
see
cry.
the ever-growing environment of discipline and control that I was coming out of.
Sure. Wow. So you're the second black player on the team. Not many people probably went to college back then at all, let alone African Americans. Probably
I was the first person, obviously, in my family to go to college, and we had a pretty large family on the other side.
But I mean, you might have. That's what year was that?
I went to Villanova in 70. I graduated in '60. So I went there in 1954 as a freshman. Graduated in 1960.
Wow. And so not many people went to college in the 50s, let alone people of color. That's really interesting. Were people supportive, or did you hear a lot?
They were very supportive. Especially my college coach. He literally kind of adopted me. He made sure I had a good job in the summer so that I could afford to buy the jacket and the khakis and things that I needed. And he found me a place to live in. He got me a room in one of the dorms on campus in the summertime, and he got me this job working on a construction crew, and so I have some sort of money. And then I don't remember the exact amount, but let's just say each time I got paid, he took $10 out and put it in the bank account so I'd have some money during the season.
Well, minimum wage back then was probably like 20 cents an hour or something like that.
And he would have him and his wife. They lived about 15 minutes from the campus, and they would invite me over to their house for dinner a couple times a week, and it was a different environment. I'd never been in such what I thought was a formal eating. I remember the first time I went to his house, and he says, have a seat over there, and I sit at the table and I look down. I see all this silverware in the dish. I have no idea what's going to happen now, and so I'm kind of I'm looking around, and I see his wife pick up a fork to start this, but I had never been in a formal eating environment.
Pick up that fork, the one on the outside. That's the salad fork. Yeah, this is like a learning curve for you.
But he always had some lessons for me to learn. And one of the things, as a freshman, we were ineligible. I was ineligible in that, and I had some really good scoring games, but always had real good rebounding games. And so the coach kept encouraging me. He said, if next year when you move up to the varsity, we don't need your scoring. He says, but where you can make a unique difference on this team and start is the rebound.
Oh, so that's the genesis of the rebound.
And so he said that not many coaches are not going to play their best rebounder or their best defensive guy, and so. Once he would create drills for me to do in practice and that, and we played Seton Hall one time, and I had 23 rebounds in the game, but part of it was that I embraced that role for myself, and I started to think of easier ways to get rebounds and so forth, and so that allowed me to stay on the team for the 4 years. In my junior and senior year, we were ranked in the top 20 the whole season. And as you know from the Jerry West story, we played West Virginia down in Morgantown, and at that time West was a senior and I was a senior, but they were number 4 in the country, and at that time we were number 6. And what was interesting about that game there's a lot of interesting things about the game in Morgantown, but what happened is we take the train from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. We stay overnight. The next day, we take the bus down to Morgantown for the game. We get down there to play the game, and no one on West Virginia's team or even in the community knew that Villanova had any black players. And all of a sudden, they do the starting lineups, and they do the visitors first. So then they announce myself, and the other player on the team was a guy named U.B. White. And so when they announced me first and him, we ran out, and there was just utter silence because no one knew that we had any black players down there. But we didn't have any overt racism, no N-word or anything like that. But, the famous story where West steals the ball and he's going in for a layup, and I chase him down and foul him from behind and knock him out of bounds into the first row of seats. And he's laying there, and utter silence goes over the place. And I'm looking at him laying there, and I'm thinking to myself, dear God, please let this white boy get up, right? It's over for me. So just as I'm thinking that, Wes reaches out his hand to pull him up. And so I pull him up and help him back on the court. And then the crowd start clapping and so forth. But it was so interesting that no one had any idea at all that we had any black players, and I fouled out of that game with 11 minutes to go, and years later, Jerry and would talk about our time together, and he said, "Do you remember what I did when you fouled out of the game?" And I says, "No." He said, "I walked over to you and I said, hey, you played a good game. Good luck. I really enjoyed playing against you." And I said, "I did. You did say that?" Because I couldn't believe I didn't remember that. And he said, "I want to tell you something else. You're the only player I ever played against in my life that when they fouled out, I ever went up and said anything to them about it." And so that relationship started back then, and then it evolved in our adult life, and really picked up strong when Jerry was running the Memphis Grizzlies when they first went down there. And then that would rekindle our relationship, and we got closer and closer and closer, and right up until the day he died. And the day he died, it's about 6 a.m, and my wife comes in the bedroom and she says, "George, I don't know how to tell you this, but I got bad news for you." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Jerry West died." And I said, I literally screamed. I said, "No, no, no!" And then I laid there in bed, start crying. I couldn't believe that he had died, but he had such an enormous impact. Even as an adult, I'd sit with him and talk basketball, and he was as good as any person that I met around the game at evaluating talent. So that was so here I am now, 87, and I only have 2 real friends left that are in my age group. All the people have died off.
Yeah, Jerry West, for those who don't know, famously, his silhouette is the NBA logo. So everybody knows who he is, even if they don't know the name. And was it intimidating at all being one of 2 black players on the team? I mean, it must have been a little bit like, all right, I'm going to play ball, but I'm aware that I'm standing out a little bit.
Our coach never talked about race, and we didn't have a problem. The students that just accepted us. There was 2 other black students. One was in the law school, and the other was a lady was in the nursing school at that time. But I got a great education. I didn't know a lot about how to construct an academic life for myself. So the second year, you had to declare a major, and so I go to my coach and I said, "Coach, we have to declare a major. What should I do?" And he says, "Just put down economics." And I said, "Well," he said, "Just listen to me. Just put down economics." And so at that time, they didn't call it the School of Business. It's called the School of Commerce and Finance. And so now my major became economics, and I'm taking accounting, cost class, all these business classes. And there was numerous times when I questioned. I said, "What am I going to do with this stuff when I graduate?" But I always had enough confidence in my coach that he wouldn't have me do this if he didn't think it was the best thing for me. And so now I go through 3 years of intense education at business school, and I learn about facets of life I never, because I had no money, but it was the best thing that happened to me was going to Villanova. I frequently say the two biggest influences on my life, educationally and knowledge-wise, were Villanova and Nike.
We'll get to Nike in just a second, but I'm curious, having worked with thousands of elite athletes over the years, what do you find are some of the most beneficial habits or daily rituals that these guys and gals actually, habits they have that pay off dramatically?
I think one is a commitment, a willingness to make unique sacrifices. You know, I say to kids, where do you want to be 5 years from now? And they'll say the NBA, and I'll say, well, let me ask you another question. What is it that you're willing to sacrifice to get to the NBA? Because you're going to have to make some sacrifices in life, and so over time, I started to realize more and more that I could utilize this information, but a lot of times it didn't necessarily have to pertain to business. Although I got fortunate when I graduated, I lived in an apartment in Germantown section of Philadelphia, and so one of the people that lived in the building where I lived, he was head of the Urban League. And so one day we arrived home from work at the same time. We're standing out on the porch talking. And he said, hey, would you have any interest in going to work at Sunoco if I could get you a job there? And I said, well, I don't know much about it. What would I do? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I could get you in one of their executive programs. And so he got me an interview. I went down and interviewed at Sunoco, and they gave me the job as a sales intern, and so that was my first job out of college, and I spent the first 2 years just really on the job training. But one quick thing, so they're opening a brand new gas station in West Philadelphia, and so my boss says, "Hey, you're in charge. You have to set up all the grand opening for the gas station, all the things that go with it, the giveaways that we give when the person comes for gas." And at the time, it didn't seem like a big deal, but the lessee was Roger Penske, the race car driver. At that time, no, he didn't have a big name like that. But his first gas station, I set up the management program for.
You're in this intersection of all these different eras. Speaking of Nike earlier, first of all, at the age of 70, when most people are immersed in retirement, you accepted what I guess is a job specifically created for you. So this is not a cushy desk job with no travel. You were the director of international basketball for Nike. So there's a lot going on here. I know you went to China early on too, as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Early in its origin as a company, Nike was just starting to try to get a foothold in sports footwear, and so they want to get the shoes exposed. So they brought 11 of us to Las Vegas for a meeting, and the meeting was, we would like you guys, we selected you purposely. We want each one of you to wear our shoe and have your team wear your shoe. Mm-hmm. And if you commit to this, we'll pay you $5,000 a year to do it, or you can take it in stock. And so I was sitting next to this Bill Foster, who then was coaching at Clemson, and he nudged me and he says, "Don't take the cash. Don't take the cash. I'll explain to you later." Mm-hmm. And so, of course, we kept this. I took stock, and it at that time was about $6, but it kept going. But now, fast back in '79, Nike sends myself, Eddie Sutton, and Bill Foster to China for a month, and at that time, Beijing didn't exist. Beijing was Peking. The country, no one spoke English. Everything was governmental. The only vehicles you would see in town were government vehicles. And so we did. Our job was we started out in Shanghai, and we were to do a week's clinics there. Then we go into Guangzhou. We'd end up in Peking at the end. So one of the things that happened that Ryan got a kick out of the story when I told him about it is we come back from the clinic one day, and we walk in the lobby, and there's the manager of the lobby and three guys in shirts and ties. And so they approach us, and we have no idea what's. And the manager says, he introduces to the head FBI guy. He just said, "This is Steve Johnson. He's head of the FBI here." And the guy takes out, shows us his badge and so forth. And now we're stunned because we're trying to figure out what we had done wrong. So he said that the manager at the hotel said, "We're moving you guys off of that floor, 2 floors down, because Jimmy Carter's coming tomorrow, and we can't have any people in the rooms above him or below him and on that floor." So they said, "We'll give you better accommodations than you have, but you're going to have to move."
Wow. So this is before Carter went to China.
Yeah. And then, so that tour went on really nice. It was, see, basketball to this day is the -- sport in China.
Definitely, yeah.
Back in the old days when the missionaries went to China and they worked with the troops, the army troops, they took basketball and taught them that to use it as a form of leisure and that. So anyway, now we fast forward, and we are now in Peking. And this is an environment like none that we've ever seen before. Everything's so militaristic. The women all had to wear a white blouse and olive green slacks, and the men wore those little, what we call Nehru caps with a star on them. So the one day we decide we're going to go to Tiananmen Square just to sightseeing. And Bill's wife had one of the Polaroid cameras at that time. So our tour guide, he takes us to Tiananmen Square, and God, I'd never seen a place that large, and there are people milling all around and so forth. And so Bill's wife starts taking some pictures, and as we're going through this process, I noticed that the crowd's getting. First, it was just 2 or 3 people staring at us, and within 10 minutes, there's like 25 people standing there staring at us.
You've never seen a black person before?
So,
is that why?
so here's what happened. We're standing there, and this elderly black man steps out of the crowd. He comes over to me, picks up my hand, and he goes.
He's rubbing your hand.
Yeah, and Bill's wife was freaking out. I said, no, chill. I said, I get it. He never seen a black person before.
But you said elderly black man. You mean elderly Chinese man, yeah?
I said elderly black black man. I mean, okay, elderly Chinese guy. I apologize.
That's all right.
Thank good.
I was confused for a second, but then I didn't realize what you meant.
I'm glad you corrected me on that. So this elderly Chinese man steps forward, and he rubs it, and Bill's wife's freaking out. I said, no, chill. He's just never seen a black person before. Yeah. And to this day, I still believe there are a lot of places on the globe where people have never seen a black person before.
For sure, definitely. Yeah, if you went to North Korea, you'd definitely run into some people who would just sit there staring at you confused.
Well, I'm sure that happened to Rodman when he went.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I'm sure it did, actually. Yeah, that's a good point. You were Michael Jordan's coach before he had a shoe deal. Tell me a little bit about that, because I know he had his heart set on Adidas initially.
Yeah, I actually was never what I would say his coach. I was more of an ally and a friend. That summer, because the team was together so long, Michael and I and Patrick Ewing and Vern Fleming, we were inseparable. We'd go to malls, the movies. We hung out all the time. And so from the time we went to training camp back in June, fast forward to the gold medal game, I was around Michael every single day, and and our relationships just continued to grow and grow. And we there would be times when Coach Knight would do things or in practice or so forth, and 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 it was for the players. It was kind of bizarre because they had never been coached like that. So when things would go on during the day, and sometimes I wasn't around to see it, and Michael would always come up to me and he'd say, "Your boy did it again," and then he told a story this one time. He said that Bob told him, "Hey, Mike, before this thing's over, I'm going to call you out at a game or in practice and cuss you out, and you're going to have to take it." And he said, and then Bob asked Michael, did Dean ever cuss? And Michael said no. And Bob he tried as hard as he could to make Michael say, no, Dean cuss, but he says, no, none of my coaches ever cussed at me. So anyway, so Bob says, I'm gonna call you out and call you all kind of names, and you just got to stand there and take it. And Michael says, why do I have to stand there and take it? He says, because the rest of the players are going to say, God damn, if he said that to Michael Jordan, what would he say to me? And but it was an interesting relationship, and it was the good thing when it was all said and done. And fast forward to years later, if anyone asked Bob Knight who was the greatest player he ever coached, without exception, he said Michael Jordan.
Sure. Yeah. How did you get him to sign with Nike instead of Adidas?
I didn't really get him to sign with Nike. There's so many different stories about how this thing transpired. And it depends on who the storyteller is. Is it Sonny? Is it George Raveling? Is it David Falk? Is it Michael? Is it Michael's mom? Is it Howard White? There were so many moving parts at that time. But I under no circumstances would I say I was the guy that brought him to Nike. I was the guy who pestered him all summer long about going with Nike because I was asked to try to recruit him, and I did. And we would joke about it all the time. And Michael would say, Coach, I'm telling you, you're wasting your time, man. I'm going to Adidas. And I was doing soft sell with him. And so now you get to this moment of decision. And I said, it depends on who's telling the story but the truth is, I did everything I possibly could to illuminate Nike in his mind as the positive entity and his future. And then you get David Falk is involved in it, Sonny Vaccaro is involved in it, Howard White's involved in it. But at the end of the day, he gets to Nike, and I just talked to David 2 days ago to call me about it. But David was able to work out a deal to financially, and he was the one who came to Nike with the idea of the signature shoe. The signature shoe didn't exist in those days.
Man, there's got to be a dartboard in the C-suite at Adidas with your picture on it for taking Michael Jordan.
As history starts to put the Jordan era in its historic perspective, one of the things historians, I believe, will call out is this. Nike was the first Fortune 500 company to take a black person and make them the face of the company. Jordan became Nike's face and from the very start, and he took Nike to where it ended up being the number one footwear and apparel company in the world. And the subset of that, he ends up having his own company, his own brand, because Jordan brand is owned by Nike, but it's run as a separate leadership group, and they've had immense sales. So here, in my mind, when you put it in this historic context, Phil Knight took a gamble. And here, in the historic context, I don't know that you'd find many Fortune 500 companies that would take a black male or a black female and make them the face of the company. But as gamble played up, if there was a person who gambled and succeeded frequently, it was Phil Knight. He was always willing to take an intelligent risk. And that was an intelligent risk there, but it worked out for him and worked out for Michael. And this idea of who brought Michael to Nike, I think it depends on who's telling the story. Sure. But I want to say I did not bring him. And first of all, I think it's a disservice to Michael a little bit if we say we brought him like he didn't have his own intelligence and understanding. And at that time he had the best agent in sports. David Falk was, and his mom and dad were very understanding of the process. So I've lived long enough to know right now. We all worked in our own ways to bring Michael Jordan to Nike. It wasn't any one person. I had an advantage because I had been around him for so long, and he trusted and respected me. And I don't know of anybody in my life other than my mom and my grandmother who trusted me like Michael did. My son and I, we met with him over in Hollywood for dinner one night, and he asked us if we were interested in running a summer camp for him, basketball camp. And so we talked it through, and sure enough, he agreed to allow us to run this camp. And so my son and I started to go out and secure the facilities and so forth. And we ran the Jordan basketball camp for 22 straight years. Wow. And we had this elaborate plan for Michael to do one more year, which would be 23.
Oh, right, yeah.
But we weren't able to make that out. But during those 22 years, the camp just took off. We had players from all over the world, and Michael did a great job of being there and participating. But I don't think in our wildest imagination, my son and I ever believed that we would do the camp for 22 straight years. Yeah. And then we did an adult camp where it was adult fantasy camp. We did that for 12 years over in Las Vegas. So I had so many different exposures to Michael, some from a work standpoint, but at the end of the day, and I look back, I feel intimidated sometimes because Michael trusted me so much. He never asked how much money or anything like that. At the end of the day, we would take the total profits. He got 60%, and Mark and I got 40%, and I would get the accountant to come in to do all the books, have the receipts, everything. So at the end of the year, when we had all this accounting work done and the pluses and minuses and the profit and everything, I would put together a check that for 60% of the profits that go to Michael, all the book work, and I sent them to his the person who ran his businesses, Esty, and then she would take them from there. And I'm sure she met with Michael on them and reviewed them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just to build that trust. Yeah.
All right, a quick break. I'm going to tell you about something that'll actually make your life a little bit easier. I regularly take shots of Ketone IQ plus caffeine from HVMN. It is 5 grams of ketones, 100 milligrams of caffeine from green tea. So no sugar, no crash, just clean, focused energy. Now, ketones are molecules that your body naturally produces during fasting, intense exercise, or a low-carb, high-fat diet, so aka ketosis. And when glucose, carbs, aren't readily available, your liver breaks down fat into ketones, which then become an alternative fuel source for your brain and muscles. And our body likes using ketones because they're a high-efficiency fuel, especially for the brain and the muscles. Ketone IQ from HVMN skips that whole process, gives you pure, drinkable ketones, so you get the benefits of ketone energy without having to fast for days on end or go full keto. I take it before I hit the gym. It gives me that steady, locked-in energy without making me feel like I'm kind of vibrating a little bit. And I also take it before I need to do a show. Same deal. I feel focused, same steady energy. And it's not just me. Team Visma, Lisa Bike, literally the best pro cycling team in the world. They use Ketone IQ to fuel their races. These guys won the Tour de France twice, dominated all 3 Grand Tours last year. Olympians, Ironman champions, they're all on this stuff because it works. So if you want to try it, go to ketone.com/Jordan. You'll get 30% off your first subscription order and a free 6-pack of Ketone IQ. That's these little things right here. Get energy that actually works. Ketone.com/Jordan. Links in the description. If you're thinking about starting a business or you already have one and maybe logo or branding design is not your strong suit, you're going to love Design.com. With Design.com, creating a standout logo is as easy as it gets. You just pop in your business name and your industry, and in seconds, you're going to get thousands of custom logos to choose from. Every design is handcrafted by top designers and exclusive to Design.com, so you're getting something unique. Once you find a design that you like, you can customize the fonts, the colors, the layouts to make it yours. Then you download all those assets and you're good to go. And Design.com doesn't just stop at logos. They've got tools to help you create all of your branding materials, from website to social media posts to business cards, all perfectly aligned with your brand. If you already have a logo, you can upload it and you get instant access to thousands of design templates that actually match your brand's look and your color scheme. So this tool saves you a lot of time. It lets you focus on growing your business instead of getting stuck in the weeds with marketing materials. With a 4.8-star Trustpilot rating, Design.com is legit amazing. It's run by a friend of mine. The company's been around for a while. They really do care about their customers. Try it for free at design.com/Jordan. That's design.com/Jordan.
Is it, and this is unrelated, but is it true that Kobe took tap dancing to work on his basketball footwork? That's hard to imagine, but it makes sense.
He was the most unusual superstar I've ever been around. He was so smart, and he had a person come in and teach him piano lessons. Another time, he decided he's going to spend the next 6 months in the off season working on his footwork. So he brought in dance teachers to teach him how to pivot and move in small spaces, how to balance and so forth. Then when he got with us and he had to go to China frequently, he now brings a person in to teach him Mandarin. And in the very beginning, he said, "Look, I just need enough to be able to say thank you, good morning, good night, and just some colloquialisms." But he had someone coming in daily and teaching him Mandarin, and when we first got him over at one of the appearances, and he said, "I'm glad to be here in China," but he said it in Chinese, and
people went nuts.
The people froze. They were. But he at one of the early meetings when we're making this transition with Kobe from Adidas to Nike, and in one of the very first meetings, he said to us, he said, "Hey, I got a suggestion. Give me China, and LeBron can have the rest of the world." And I mean, I look back now and I think, God damn, he was so ahead of his times in understanding business and that. And everybody in the room kind of froze because no one was ready for that. But he said, "Give me China and LeBron can have the rest of the world," because he knew the opportunities in the future are going to be there. This is a country that loves basketball, although 90% of the basketball in China is played outdoors. And when we took him over to China, it was people just adored him, and he never was late for a meeting. I'll tell you a funny story. We're in Hong Kong, and we're going out to a retail appearance, and so the top floor, we bought the whole top floor of the peninsula in Kowloon, which is a section of Hong Kong, and so Kobe had that whole top floor. So he's got to go out to this retail appearance. So we have a meeting with him to tell him what's going to happen and so forth. And so we got it all planned and so Kobe says, all right, let's go. And he said, but hey, listen, when we get down to the and get off the elevator, there's going to be a lot of people there asking for autographs and pictures. When we get off the elevator, nobody stop. Just keep straight for the door and don't stop. And so we get off, and sure enough, there's people out there with the pins and everything. And so this one kid runs up to him with, and so we keep moving, and Kobe's still, and he has it, and he's walking slow, and he signs it. So then another kid comes, he walking slow. By the time we got to the door and out to the vehicle, he had ended up signing about 6 of them. And we get in the van. And I said, man, you are something. And he said, he knew what I was talking about. He said, but it worked though, didn't it? You know, I said, we didn't have to have all this. We didn't have to stop, take pictures, get all that. He said, we were out of the door, and he signed 6, and all he did was sign 6 autographs. He had such great relationship skills. I would say that if I were ranking athletes in their business ability, I would say Kobe would be first, Michael would be second. Tiger Woods would be in that top 3, and then LeBron. And I base that on the meetings I've sat in with them, the deals we negotiated with them, and that. They all had their own mannerisms. They all were very smart. But Kobe was a handful. He was the one who got Nike to switch from high tops to low tops because he refused to wear them. And that first year, he said, "I'm not wearing high tops." And everybody, we had the guys in the shoe design department at Nike had designed this really nice high top, and so what you do is you create a footwear calendar. So they say, okay, Kobe, when you go to training camp, you're wearing this shoe, summer league. And so basically they change the footwear as you go across the calendar, and that, well, you can't have a shoe that Kobe's wearing a shoe and it's not at retail. So now we got a problem. We've already got over $1 million in footwear in the warehouse of the high tops made. And so Kobe just wouldn't budge. And so they had to eat all those shoes in the warehouse, and then subsequently go out and build a new line of footwear that was low cut.
So somewhere out there's 100,000 pairs of almost Kobe high tops that aren't supposed to exist.
Yeah. And I'm not sure how we dealt with it, but if Kobe strongly believed in something and it was right, you weren't going to talk him out of it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's funny. That makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, you hear this behind the scenes stuff quite a bit. I want to talk about reading because I know you're so passionate about reading. Ryan Holiday, our mutual friend who set this up, said you might actually read more than he does. And you always bring people books, which I mentioned at the top of the show. I know people call you the human Google, or used to, some of your friends. So I would love to hear your perspective on reading, because I know you read multiple books at once, why do you do that? I can't barely plow through one at a time. It seems like multiple would just be juggling.
Well, I think it allows me to get a flow. If I come to and almost every book I've ever read, at least 3 chapters were unnecessary. And so when I buy a book and I open it up, I first thing I do is go to the table of contents and look at the chapters, and then one of the titles will catch my eye, and so then I go back to that chapter and I start to read through, and the style, the information, and then once I go through an exam, I read about the author and so forth, and then I'll ask myself, okay, if I buy this book, what lessons am I going to learn? And at the end, I'll come to a conclusion. But I read 4 or 5 at a time, because if I get bored with one, I can go to the other one. And I always tried to carry a book with me wherever I went, because if I'm at the dental office, I'm standing in line, these are all opportunities for reading. And I felt it shouldn't be much of a problem for me to get at least 30 minutes a day of reading. And if I'm organized and I look for opportunities to read, if I'm on a bus, if I'm on a plane, I always bring enough reading material to keep myself entertained.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I feel like reading constantly on planes. I'll plow through 2 books on a plane ride and just finish them right then and there. I just sort of devour these, which is interesting because I did not grow up as a reader. I didn't have time. I couldn't focus. Audiobooks were kind of a saving grace for me. It's a lot easier for me to focus on something like that.
Then what I do is I underline in the book. I put right up on the margins. And almost every book, there's 6 blank pages in it, and sometimes rather than take out my notepad, I just started to write notes on the side, and so let me explain this. So I started keeping notes from books I've read and speeches and that. And so I call them learning journals. And so I have a learning journal from every year from 1972 to today. I still have.
Oh, wow.
And so what I do is, and then I start to go through and take notes and add them. And I used to have my secretary do it, but now I kind of feel it makes me feel better when I write them in myself. So anyway, I just wanted I can work this in, but I wanted you to understand.
I'd love to talk, before we run out of time here, I definitely want to talk about this MLK speech, because this is sort of like almost like a Forrest Gump movie moment where you're just in the right place at the right time in some way, just unbelievable throughout this intersection of history. I'd love to hear how that even happened.
If there was ever a time in my life when being in the right place at the right time was immensely rewarding, it would be that. I had a friend, Warren Wilson, who was my best friend at the time, and his dad was the most prominent black person in the state of Delaware. They lived right on the state line of Delaware and Pennsylvania, and the town called Claymont, Delaware. And his dad was clearly the most prominent black person in the state of Delaware at the time, a really avid sports fan, and that. And so this, I used to go by once or twice a week and have dinner at their house. And so this happened on a Thursday night. We're having dinner, and television wasn't as prominent in the homes as it is right now. But Dr. Wilson had it on a news show on the radio, and the commentator comes on and starts to talk about there's the March on Washington, and if they're able to pull this off, it'd be the greatest gathering of black people in one place in the history of America. And he went on to say they're expecting 2,000 to 3,000 people. And so Warren's dad said, "Are you guys going down?" And we said, "No." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, we don't have any money in transportation." So he said, "All right, I'll take care of that. Warren, you take the other car. I'll give you guys enough money for food and housing, but you guys should go down." When I look back now, I always think he must have had a premonition that something special was going to happen. So we get down there at night. At that time, the main thoroughfare in and out of Washington, D.C. was New York Avenue. So we pull in and we find a motel there, a cheap room. We get it, and then Warren says, "Let's drive downtown just to the Monument Ground so that we can get a feel for things." So we drive down. It's darkest, and we're walking around, and we run into this gentleman, and he looks at us and he says, "You guys coming tomorrow?" And we said, "Yes." And he said, "Would you have any interest in being on the security detail?" And so we said, "Well, what do we have to do?" And he explained it. And we said, "Sure, we'll do it." So he said, "Meet me here 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, same spot." So we meet him, and he looks at us, we're both 6'4". He says, "Well, I'm going to put you guys up on the podium security." And he says, "You see that guy over there, that tall guy? Yeah, go over and tell him I sent you, and he'll do the rest." And so we were on the security detail for the podium. You had all the, Baldwin, Marion Anderson, all these black celebrities and movie stars are up there. And so the plan was that if any trouble broke out, the security were to form this U around them, and take the people to the back of the Lincoln Memorial. There was 2 buses in the back there in the driveway. And so what we would do is usher them all into the bus for safe security. There was the front bus, the first 4 rows were being reserved if we have to do it. The king and his family sit there. And so there was an escape route in case something broke out. And so the key was, when he got down to the last paragraph, we knew what the last paragraph was. They would say, "Okay, start to move in." So as soon as he's done, we're in position. So King is going through the prepared speech. First of all, the speech had no title. The title came later, and the most important part of the speech didn't exist. It was ad-libbed in. So King goes along and he gets to the last paragraph, and just as he's coming to a closure, you hear this female voice say, "Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream." And the dream, she had heard Dr. King, because she was a big advocate for him, was Mahalia Jackson. And so the voice is Mahalia Jackson, and she's saying, "Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream," because she'd heard that part of it and other places when she worked with them. And Harry Belafonte and her Mahalia Jackson, they basically financed that whole movement. There was a time when Martin called Mahalia and said, "Hey, I got bad news for you." And she said, "What, Martin?" He said, "We don't have any money to go forward. We're going to be out of money in a week, and we're going to have to close shop." And she said, "Don't do it, don't do it." She said, "Let me think." And then she goes out and books 10 concerts across the United States, does them, and gives all the money to Dr. King. So now you fast forward to this. Tell him about the dream. So now Martin Luther King ad-libs that into the speech, but it wasn't supposed to be in that at all. So, couple things. At the end, King starts folding the speech. Why, I don't know, but thank you, God, for making me, allowing me to do this. I just said to him, and actually in the CBS documentary, you can see it. So just as he's folding it and turning, I said, "Dr. King, can I have that copy?" Why I said that, I have no idea. And he handed it to me. And so I subsequently had the original speech for over 50 years before anybody knew anything about it. So when the ceremonies are over, the leaders, A. Philip Randolph and Byron Rustin, King, and those people, they were invited to the White House. And so when they walk in the Oval Office, the president looks up and he sees Martin Luther King and he says, "Dr. King, I loved your I Have a Dream speech." And that was the title. So now the media picked up on this I Have a Dream speech, and that became the the title.
So what did you do with the speech? He folds it up, you put it in your pocket.
I had to put it in my pocket, and then when I got back, I don't even remember. I'm sure we said to Dr. Wilson that we had it and so forth, but my senior year at Villanova, I played in the East-West College All-Star game in Kansas City. It was the only college All-Star game in the country at the time. And so I got to represent Villanova on the East squad. And so while we were in Kansas City, one day they took us out to Independence, Missouri to meet President Truman. And we go out and walk in his office. It's just like the Oval Office in the White House. And we're seated, and he talks to us. And I was just stunned. I couldn't even believe that he was even interested in basketball or us. But he talked to us and about his career and then thanked us for coming and he said, I look forward to reading about you guys in the coming years. And as we turned to go out, we noticed up against the wall, there's stacks of books. And he gave each one of us, it was a 2-volume history of his life and presidency. And so I get out and I'm on the bus and I open mine up and I look and it says, to George H. Raveling from Harry S. Truman, and it's signed it and the dates on it. So I put the folded speech of King inside there for a couple reasons. One, I knew I would never throw those books away because how many people can say they have a signed book from the president, personally signed to them, and I would always remember where it was. So I put the folded speech inside of one of the Truman books, and it stayed there for years. In fact, in one of the book that it stayed in, if we had it, and you open it up, you can see the shadow from where the paper was in that.
How long was it in there?
I would say until I got the book, and I am now taking the job at the University of Iowa. I've already put in my 11 years at Washington State and so forth. So the sports writer from the Cedar Rapids paper calls and says, hey, we'd like to do a story on it, because at that time I was going to be the first black coach at Iowa, but also the first black coach in the Big Ten. So the reporter comes down. They're going to do, at that time, most of the newspapers had a Sunday magazine section. And so they're going to do the next Sunday's magazine section that comes with the newspaper. I'm going to be on the cover story. And so we go through the interview. And toward the end, I don't know if he just a throw-in question, he says, have you ever done anything in the civil rights? And I said, well, kind of. And I told him about the King's speech and he goes, oh, you got it? I said, yeah. And he said, well, can I see it? Well, I had only been in Iowa City for about a week, and I moved into the house, and all the boxes were in the basement. So we went down and we went through and we found it. God, I thought he was gonna freak out. Oh! And then he says, "Can I call my editor?" And he's on there. I mean, he's going bananas about it. And so that was the first public declaration that I had it. And so now, and so also in the meantime, history's still working to put this "I Have a Dream" speech in its historic context. Today, in this new era, USA Today would say the 3 greatest speeches of all time were "I Have a Dream," Kennedy's inaugural address, and Churchill's speech to the British when they're getting ready to go to war. So it took a long time for that speech to find its historic resonance.
Man,
and so
it's just in a book this whole time.
And it's accumulating value the longer you went along with it.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised collectors didn't try to buy it from you. Did people try to buy it from you?
I had the book for 20 some years before people ever realized that I had it. And once it became public knowledge, now there was a heightened interest on seeing it and so forth.
So did anybody try to buy the speech from you that you had it stuck in that book for that long? Surely somebody was like, "Oh, I'll give you $1 million for this thing."
The longer I had the speech, the more I would think about it in futuristic terms, and I had said publicly that if I die, my son will inherit it. So as time moved on, I felt that I needed a way that I could share the speech with the public. Subsequently, we were able to work out an arrangement with Villanova and the African Museum to share the speech and on public display, and it's worked out very well. And ultimately, someday it'll rest in the hands of Villanova University.
Yeah. I know we're running a little bit out of time here. I definitely wanted to. It's funny, you told me this maybe 10 years ago or something like that when we first met, and I guess I wrote it down. You'll have to tell me if this is from your book or something like that, but I wrote it down. And you said, at this current stage in my evolution, I consciously focus every day on taking my life back. You either control your life or somebody exterior of you controls your life. Being the best you can be starts with taking your life back. And when you take your life back, you're the scorekeeper of your journey. You manage your time, energy, and you begin to manage your time, your energy, and your environment more earnestly and wisely, becoming the artist of your canvas, the CEO of your life, and the author of your story. And I'm curious if now that you're 87, I hate asking this question, but do you think about the legacy that you'll leave behind? And you know, what Ryan Holiday teaches us, memento mori, you know, you might not be here tomorrow. And I'm wondering, you know, what your philosophy is on this kind of thing at this point in your life.
At this point in my life, at 87, I have a goal, and that goal is to be one of the most uncommon 87-year-old human beings on planet Earth. I truly believe there's going to be some really exciting and rewarding opportunities that are still out there for me, and I've changed the way I live my life now at 87 years old. I don't chase money. I don't chase fame, any of those things. I just look for unique opportunities to express my existence at age 87. I often think how blessed I've been to be on this planet for 87 years. And I say to myself, there's got to be a reason that God allowed you to reside on planet Earth this long. And so when I go back and I look at my life, in some ways I think this is a story about an 87-year-old black man who was born in Washington, D.C., and it's about his journey from a youth to an adult, and what an extraordinary journey it's going to be. But at the same time, I think about, people will say about, they come to me numerous times, people would say, hey, I'd like to do a book on your life, or I'd like to do this. And one of the things that I would say to them is I'm not ready to do a book right now, because if I do it right now, the last 3 chapters haven't been lived yet. I feel like right now there's the last 2 chapters of the book of my life are still out there at 87. I have a chance to write the last 2 chapters of the book of my life.
It's an amazing life that you've lived so far. I'm looking forward to the. I know you reinvent yourself every 5 years. You told me that a few years back as well. In fact, I think 7 or 8 years ago, we had a conversation. I have it in here somewhere where you said you were studying AI, and I was like, "Oh, AI. I don't really know what that is." And now, of course, everybody is a buzz topic. You were on that before anybody else that I knew. I think you were on the AI tip. So thank you for coming out and having this conversation with me. I know it's not easy to get around in LA in the rain. That's for sure.
Well, I would do it anytime. I enjoy speaking with you. I always felt blessed when you asked me to come on your show years ago, and sometimes these situations are most helpful to me because they help me revisit different aspects of my life that I'd forgotten about, and I. Thank God for these 87 years on earth. And I hope that when the time comes and I get up to heaven and St. Peter's there and he says, "What's your name?" And I said, "George Raveling." And he said, "Job well done, son, enter." And to me, and sometimes people will say to me, "What would you like to have on your gravestone?" And I think, here lies a poor man who lived a rich life. If that was on my gravestone, I'd feel good. Here's a poor man who lived a rich life, and I do believe that I live not monetarily, but almost all aspects of my life have been rewarding and beneficial.